Okay, so we're still in the principles of the melachot. Apparently, Rabbi Melamed did give many different chapters to the different melachot, the ones that are more common for regular people, like cooking and separating and stuff like that. Um, and we'll get to it, but one of the things that we did mention in passing before was the difference between knots that are permanent and knots that are not permanent. And so this halacha, it's a short halacha talking about kiyum, which means to be sustainable and basically stay, almost like permanent. So the Torah prohibits melacha on Shabbat only when the result is lasting. If it is not lasting, there is no Torah prohibition. Therefore, one who writes with a pencil or pen on paper transgresses a Torah prohibition, since this writing will last for a long time. However, if one writes with fruit juice, whose color fades quickly, or on a leaf that will soon dry out and crumble, then the prohibition is rabbinic. Similarly, writing in sand or in the condensation on a window is rabbinically prohibited, since it does not last. But if you're just, making a line to see clearly through the window or stuff like that, that will be completely permissible as far as I know, because we don't even need the result. We just want to see clearly through the window. Along the same lines, one who ties a durable knot that will hold for an extended period of time transgresses the Torah prohibition, while one who ties a temporary knot that will not last long transgresses a rabbinic prohibition. A very loose knot that is easily undone and has absolutely no permanence, like a single knot on the knot of a tie uh, or a shoe, is not prohibited at all, since it is easily untied, and we'll see more about that in chapter 13. Same applies to the melacha of boneh. If one affixes a hook on the wall in a permanent way, he transgresses a Torah prohibition, while one who affixes it temporarily transgresses a rabbinic prohibition. And when we learn more about boneh, and the perika boneh of Shabbat actually starts with the idea that if you have a cupboard, and in those days it wasn't a cupboard that was connected to the wall. Maybe they didn't have the um, technical ability for that or something else, but they would have like these chests, and if a door gets loosened on a chest of such or a chicken coop, which is also mentioned there, you are allowed to um, put it in a way that looks like it's holding, but you're not using your nails or screws to put it properly back in. That is permissible. I guess the same thing would be with glasses that you just put the handle back on, maybe a tiny little piece of tape. That's not considered fixing it, because it's very clear that you're not makebe patish or doing the melacha. On the same note, there's a law called grama, which means causing, and there's a lot more leniency there in terms of safek pikuach nefesh. So again, because it's a rabbinical prohibition, so I'll just give a brief introduction. The sages learned from the verse, "You shall not do any melacha," that the Torah prohibits the actual performance of a melacha. But if the melacha is done automatically, even if a person caused it to be done, it is considered grama. And it is not prohibited by the Torah. In cases of great necessity, one may use grama to achieve the result of a melacha. For example, if a fire is spreading, one may surround the fire with containers filled with water, so that when the fire reaches them, the containers will burst open and the water inside them will pour out, putting out the fire. And all agree that grama is permitted only in exceptional circumstances, to avoid loss in service of a mitzvah or for some other great need. Barring these circumstances, one may not cause melacha to be done on Shabbat. So going back to the one about kiyum, which we just discussed, there's actually a connection in terms of doctors today on Shabbat. Doctors or nurses are required to give instructions, and there's a pen called Et Shabbat that Machon Tzomet invented, which is a great thing. But if you have a non-Jewish nurse and the doctor can give her instructions, even if she's writing with an actual pen, or he or she are writing with an actual pen, that would be both this grama and the kiyum. And so I think that that's a good example, even when it's a real pen. But if I understand correctly, what works with the pen of Shabbat is that even though you're scribbling, the ink only flows a few seconds later, like in a delay. There's also a microphone of such that was created by Machon Tzomet for larger synagogues, and the synagogue in Montreal that my uncle goes to uses that. Again, that's based on grama. But I think because we are in Parshat Yitro, that even though this is only 6 minutes into the class, I think that I found an amazing connection to the Parsha and try to bear with me. So in Baba Batra, we learned that who wrote each one of the books. And so we start with the Torah. The 5 books of Moses were written by Moses. And then the Gemara brings an opinion that Joshua wrote his book and the last 8 verses of the Torah. And the last 8 verses of the Torah, where it says that Vayamot Sham Moshe Eved Hashem, that Moses wrote, or Joshua wrote. That's the question basically. Who can write that Moshe died? If Moshe was still alive, how can he say in past tense that he wrote he died? So until here, Moshe wrote, but from here on are the words of Joshua, and that's according to Rabbi Yehuda, and other rabbis question that. How can that be? And so the conclusion that they have, because Rav Shimon says, how can a Torah be missing even one verse or one letter? And so his solution for the problem is Ad kan HaKadosh Baruch Hu Omer Moshe Omer Kotev. So until this point, the Holy One, blessed be He, dictated and Moses repeated after him and wrote the text letter for letter. From this point forward, with respect to Moses' death, the Holy One, blessed be He, dictated and Moses wrote with tears. But the word in Hebrew, it doesn't say what that means. The proper translation of the word dema could be tears, but in the law of trumot, of separating tithes, it says that medamea, which means mixing. So you're not allowed to mix fruit that was already tithed with fruit that did not tithed, and then say that you're taking only less amount of the tenth because of that mixing. And so that's already 2 explanations. One is that he wrote them while crying, which doesn't explain how it's still allowed. It just says that it means that he's saying, I died, and that's why he's crying. The second explanation is that he wrote the letters in a mixture, meaning that just like the Torah was written before Moses wrote it, it was all 304,805 letters were already written, and he just separated them to words the way that they are supposed to be separated based on Hashem's dictation. I'll just give one simple example. If Joseph didn't go and was thrown into the pit, those letters of the Torah were already written, so Hashem would have told Moses how to write them differently, but to use the same exact letters for that story. And also some of the weird names in Bereshit and Shmot that are written also could be with that explanation. But I think the last explanation, which I really, really favor, is something that I heard from my rabbis in Shalvim, which is that this dema is not tears or irvuv or mixing, but rather an invisible ink. And so, according to this explanation, Joshua wrote those 8 verses after Moses already wrote them with invisible ink. And according to some of the opinions in the Gemara in a different place, Moshe died on Shabbat. And so we already discussed about the enchanted pen that's writing. So it would be the same thing that Moses was writing the Torah with an invisible ink that is not transgressing the prohibition of Shabbat. And then Joshua was told either how to reveal what was written or how to write it. And either way, Moshe wrote the complete Sefer Torah. And according to our understanding, back to Parshat Yitro, in the first 40 days that he was on the mountain, and this is Rashi in next week's Parsha, chapter 24, verse 4, Rashi says that Moshe wrote all of book of Genesis, book of Bereshit, and the first 20 chapters of Shmot until verse 15, where the last commandment, of the Ten Commandments is mentioned, and that's how the Torah was written. So I wish everybody a very good Shabbos, and I hope that you accept this explanation.